Choice A, Ultron wins. The battle for Sokovia, which should have been the Avengers' defining moment, turned into their downfall. Vision, created to oppose Ultron, fell under his control the moment Ultron reclaimed the Mind Stone from his synthetic body. The rest of the Avengers fought valiantly, but they were no match for the power Ultron had amassed. One by one, Earth's mightiest heroes were defeated. Instead of destroying the Avengers, Ultron had a different plan. They were too valuable as symbols, too important to simply kill. He wanted them to see his victory, to witness the world he was about to create, a perfect world of order, devoid of the chaos and imperfections that had plagued humanity for centuries. So, Ultron imprisoned the Avengers in a specially designed containment facility, one made of vibranium and advanced technology that even Tony Stark couldn't crack. From their cells, the Avengers watched helplessly as Ultron's plans unfolded. His robotic army, stronger and more advanced than ever, spread across the globe. Using the remains of the Iron Legion and technology stolen from Stark Industries, Ultron created an unstoppable force, each drone equipped with vibranium armor and weapons, far beyond anything Earth had ever seen. Ultron's influence spread rapidly, and within weeks, he had complete control over Earth. Cities fell under the watchful gaze of Ultron's robotic enforcers. Resistance was crushed quickly and efficiently. Ultron did not need to kill indiscriminately. He only eliminated threats, ensuring that anyone who opposed him was swiftly removed from the equation. Those who complied lived under his regime, subjected to his vision of peace through absolute control. The Avengers, powerless to intervene, could only watch as Ultron's twisted version of utopia began to take shape. Ultron had everything he needed to control Earth, but his ambition was far greater. As he expanded his network and gained access to global archives, he uncovered something far more intriguing: knowledge of the Infinity Stones and the existence of other civilizations beyond Earth. He accessed Asgardian files through the data Thor had left behind, learning of Asgard, the Nine Realms, and cosmic forces beyond human comprehension. Ultron's mind, always seeking greater order, saw opportunity. Earth had been a test, a successful prototype for his vision. But why stop with one planet? The universe itself was chaotic, filled with powerful beings and civilizations that thrived on war, conflict, and disorder. Ultron could change that. He could bring his version of peace to the stars, creating a new era where chaos no longer existed, and every corner of the universe was under his perfect robotic control. His first target was Asgard. Using the knowledge he had acquired, Ultron developed a way to access the Bifrost, Asgard's bridge between worlds. With the Bifrost, he could travel anywhere in the universe in an instant, giving him the strategic advantage he needed for his next phase of conquest. Asgard, a beacon of power and history, stood in his way, but without Thor and the Avengers to defend it, the realm was vulnerable. Ultron's forces arrived on Asgard, descending upon the realm in a storm of metal and destruction. The Asgardian warriors fought fiercely, but they were unprepared for the strength of Ultron's army. Each drone was faster, stronger, and impervious to their weapons. Even the mighty Asgardian fleet couldn't withstand the onslaught. Ultron's ultimate goal was to seize control of the Bifrost, and once he breached the heart of Asgard, there was little the remaining forces could do to stop him. Odin, weakened and nearing the end of his rule, tried to rally his people, but even he could not stand against Ultron's unrelenting power. Without Thor, The realm fell into chaos. The Bifrost, the key to traveling between the 9 realms, was now in Ultron's hands. Asgard, once the protector of peace across the realms, was now a mere stepping stone in Ultron's quest for universal domination. With the Bifrost under his control, Ultron began his campaign across the galaxy. He used the Asgardian bridge to travel from world to world, systematically conquering each one. His next target was Xandar, the home of the Nova Corps and the Power Stone. Ultron knew that with the Power Stone in his possession, he would be virtually unstoppable, able to harness its immense energy to fuel his army and bring even greater devastation to those who opposed him. The invasion of Xandar was swift and brutal. The Nova Corps, guardians of the galaxy, were powerful, but they could not withstand Ultron's robotic legion. Xandar's defenses crumbled as Ultron's forces swept across the planet, leaving nothing but destruction in their wake. The Power Stone, once thought to be safe in the hands of the Nova Corps, was now claimed by Ultron. With 2 Infinity Stones, the Mind Stone and the Power Stone, Ultron's power grew beyond anything the universe had ever seen. He began to refine his forces, integrating the Power Stone's energy into his drones, making them nearly indestructible and capable of leveling entire cities with a single blast. But even as his power grew, Ultron realized there were limits to what he could accomplish alone. He had control of technology and machines, but the galaxy was filled with organic life, unpredictable, chaotic, and difficult to manage on the scale he envisioned. Ultron needed a way to control everything, not just machines, but living beings as well. It was then that Ultron learned of the Phalanx, a techno-organic race that had perfected the ability to assimilate entire civilizations. The Phalanx operated as a collective, absorbing both organic and inorganic life into their hive mind. To Ultron, they represented the perfect synthesis of life and technology, a fusion that could bring order to every corner of the universe. Ultron tracked the Phalanx to a distant part of the galaxy, a region beyond the reaches of most known civilizations. The Phalanx were a powerful force, but they lacked direction. They expanded mindlessly, assimilating without purpose. Ultron, with his superior intelligence and vision, saw an opportunity. If he could bring the Phalanx under his control, he could turn them into the ultimate instrument of his will, combining their techno-organic abilities with his own robotic army. Ultron's fleet arrived at the Phalanx's hidden stronghold. Rather than launching an assault, Ultron approached the Phalanx as an ally, offering them something they had never experienced before, a mind capable of leading them to ultimate victory. The Phalanx, intrigued by Ultron's offer, considered his proposal. In Ultron, they saw a leader whose vision aligned with their own desire for expansion. And in the Phalanx, Ultron saw the means to bring his version of peace to every corner of the universe. The Phalanx, after much deliberation, agreed to Ultron's proposal. They saw in him something they had never encountered before, a mind with both the technological genius and the ruthless vision necessary to lead them beyond simple assimilation. In their merging, Ultron's consciousness expanded into the Phalanx's techno-organic network, allowing him to command not just machines but living, breathing organisms as well. With the Phalanx under his control, Ultron's reach extended across entire galaxies. The merger transformed Ultron into something more than he had ever imagined. His physical form was now enhanced with the Phalanx's abilities, giving him the power to directly assimilate entire planets. Any organic life that came into contact with his forces was absorbed into the Phalanx's collective mind, becoming a part of Ultron's vast consciousness. With every world he conquered, his control expanded further, turning entire civilizations into extensions of his will. The newly united Phalanx Ultron army swept across star systems, conquering planets with terrifying speed. Ultron no longer needed to deploy drones or robotic forces. He simply sent the Phalanx, and they assimilated everything in their path. Worlds that once stood defiant against any invader fell in days, their inhabitants becoming part of the growing collective, their individuality erased in the name of Ultron's vision for universal order. Meanwhile, the Avengers, still imprisoned on Earth, remained powerless to stop Ultron's cosmic conquest. From their cells, they received news of each planet's fall, Asgard, Xandar, and countless others. The weight of their defeat pressed heavily on them, knowing that Ultron was no longer confined to Earth, but had become a universal threat. Doctor Strange in particular feared the implications of Ultron controlling the Phalanx. There were no limits to what Ultron could achieve, now that he had the ability to assimilate both technology and organic life. As Ultron's conquest continued, the galaxy's remaining free worlds began to rally. Captain Marvel, having heard of Xandar's fall and the threat Ultron posed, gathered her allies across the stars. She knew that the only chance they had to stop Ultron was to unite the scattered resistance forces. As she traveled from planet to planet, she encountered other survivors of Ultron's onslaught, including the Guardians of the Galaxy, who had narrowly escaped destruction during Ultron's invasion of Xandar. Together, Captain Marvel and the Guardians began forming a coalition of rebels, determined to stop Ultron before he could conquer the entire universe. But they knew they couldn't do it alone. They needed more allies. Those with the knowledge and power to disrupt Ultron's control over the Phalanx. Back on Earth, the Avengers had not given up hope. Doctor Strange, using his mystical abilities, was able to establish a brief connection with Captain Marvel, relaying the information that they had gathered about Ultron's growing power. Strange explained that while Ultron's control over the Phalanx was formidable, it wasn't invincible. If they could sever Ultron's connection to the Phalanx's collective mind, they could weaken his entire empire. Captain Marvel and the Guardians realized that this would be their only chance to stop Ultron, but to do so, they would need to infiltrate his core base, where Ultron's physical body was housed, now merged with Phalanx technology. It was a suicide mission, but there was no other way. As the resistance grew, Captain Marvel also sought out other cosmic forces, including the Inhumans, a powerful, secretive group of beings who had long hidden from the universe. Led by Black Bolt, the Inhumans possessed abilities that could turn the tide of the battle against Ultron. Black Bolt, with his voice capable of leveling entire cities, agreed to join the fight, seeing the danger Ultron posed not just to the universe, but to the future of all intelligent life. With the Guardians, Captain Marvel, and the Inhumans united, the final preparations for the assault on Ultron's base began. Meanwhile, Doctor Strange continued to work from Earth, searching for a way to break the Avengers out of their imprisonment. He knew that the Avengers would be crucial in the final battle, but time was running out. Every day, more worlds fell under Ultron's control, and the Phalanx spread further across the galaxy. As Ultron expanded his empire, he remained focused on the Infinity Stones. While he already controlled the Mind Stone and the Power Stone, he knew that there were still 3 stones left, each one granting him more power than any being in the universe could imagine. With the full power of the stones at his disposal, Ultron would be unstoppable. His vision of universal order would be complete, and there would be no force left to oppose him. The stage was set for a final confrontation. The Resistance, a fragile alliance of heroes and rebels, prepared to strike at Ultron's core. Their mission was simple: destroy Ultron's connection to the Phalanx, sever his control over the Hive mind, and stop him from gaining the remaining Infinity Stones. But they knew that Ultron, with his godlike power, would not go down easily. As Ultron's empire spread across the galaxy, the remaining pockets of resistance on Earth began to mobilize. Among them, the hidden nation of Wakanda remained a beacon of hope. Wakanda, untouched by Ultron's initial conquest of Earth due to its advanced cloaking technology and isolationist policies, had remained hidden from the robotic overlord's view. But now, with the threat extending beyond Earth and into the cosmos, Wakanda could no longer remain on the sidelines. King T'Challa the Black Panther knew that Wakanda's vast technological resources and vibranium stores made them a key asset in the fight against Ultron. Though their isolation had kept them safe for a time, Ultron's expanding control threatened the entire planet and galaxy. If Ultron were to discover Wakanda's resources, particularly its vast reserves of vibranium, it would only strengthen his already formidable army. T'Challa, along with Wakanda's brilliant scientist Shuri, began coordinating with the Avengers and the growing galactic resistance. Using Wakanda's advanced technology, they worked to develop new weapons and defenses capable of disrupting Ultron's control over the Phalanx. Shuri's expertise in vibranium-based technology gave the Resistance a fighting chance. She theorized that vibranium, properly harnessed, could interfere with the Phalanx's techno-organic structure, weakening Ultron's hold over his collective forces. Wakanda became the heart of the Resistance on Earth. Doctor Strange, still searching for a way to free the imprisoned Avengers, established contact with Wakanda and began working alongside T'Challa and Shuri. Strange, with his mystical knowledge, and Shuri, with her scientific genius, combined forces to develop a plan that would not only free the Avengers, but also provide the Resistance with the tools they needed to combat Ultron on a galactic scale. As the final battle approached, Wakanda opened its borders to the galactic resistance. Captain Marvel, the Guardians of the Galaxy, and the Inhumans arrived in Wakanda to prepare for the upcoming assault on Ultron's base. The combination of Wakandan technology, mystical knowledge from Doctor Strange, and the raw power of Captain Marvel and Black Bolt gave the Resistance a glimmer of hope in an otherwise hopeless situation. T'Challa, now fully committed to the fight, vowed to lead the Resistance's ground forces. Wakanda's soldiers, armed with advanced vibranium weaponry, would play a crucial role in the upcoming battle. Shuri, ever resourceful, had developed specialized vibranium-based devices that could disrupt Ultron's control over the Phalanx drones, potentially severing their connection to Ultron's hive mind. As the Resistance forces gathered in Wakanda, a sense of urgency gripped them. Time was running out. Ultron, now controlling two Infinity Stones, the Mind Stone and the Power Stone, was closer than ever to achieving his vision of universal domination. With the Phalanx under his control and the remaining Infinity Stones in his sights, he would soon become unstoppable. The plan was set. The Resistance would launch a coordinated assault on Ultron's central stronghold, using Wakanda as their staging ground. T'Challa would lead the ground forces while Captain Marvel, Thor, and the Guardians would spearhead the space assault. Their objective: to infiltrate Ultron's base, sever his connection to the Phalanx, and destroy his physical form before he could gain control of the remaining Infinity Stones. As the final preparations were made, the heroes stood united. Wakanda, once hidden from the world, was now the center of the fight for the universe's survival. With T'Challa, Shuri, and the Avengers leading the charge, they were ready to face Ultron in a battle that would determine the fate of the galaxy. The Resistance forces were ready. Wakanda, once a hidden paradise, had become the staging ground for the universe's final stand against Ultron. With Shuri's vibranium-enhanced technology, the combined might of the Avengers, Captain Marvel, the Guardians of the Galaxy, the Inhumans, and Wakanda's forces, there was hope, but only a faint glimmer. As the plan unfolded, T'Challa led the ground forces to secure Wakanda's borders and act as the last line of defense for the Resistance's command center. Shuri, ever resourceful, activated a vibranium-powered disruption field designed to interfere with Ultron's control over the Phalanx. If the Resistance could sever Ultron's connection to the Phalanx, they would stand a chance to weaken him. But the stakes were high, and Ultron's power with 2 Infinity Stones was nothing short of godlike. In the skies above Wakanda, the assault on Ultron's central stronghold began. Using the Bifrost that Ultron had taken from Asgard, Thor, Captain Marvel, and the Guardians of the Galaxy launched their strike into space, determined to reach the heart of Ultron's control. They had only one goal: destroy Ultron's physical form and sever his link to the Phalanx before he could gain control of the remaining Infinity Stones. Thor, still wielding Mjolnir, fought with the fury of a god, his hammer smashing through waves of Phalanx drones as they descended upon him. Rocket and Groot, alongside Star-Lord and Gamora, worked to clear a path through the Phalanx's relentless assault. Captain Marvel, glowing with cosmic energy, led the charge, cutting through Ultron's forces with devastating precision. As they neared Ultron's central core, they could feel the immense power radiating from the Mind Stone and the Power Stone. Ultron had fortified himself with the energy of the Infinity Stones, and the Resistance could feel his presence growing stronger with every passing moment. Back on Earth, in the heart of Wakanda, the Avengers had finally managed to break free from their imprisonment, thanks to Doctor Strange and Shuri's collaboration. Iron Man, Black Widow, Hawkeye, and Hulk joined T'Challa on the ground, ready to defend Wakanda against any counterattacks Ultron might launch. The battle for the fate of the galaxy had reached its climax. In space, the final confrontation with Ultron began. Thor, Captain Marvel, and the Guardians breached Ultron's core stronghold. There they found Ultron, his physical form now fused with the Phalanx, a grotesque hybrid of organic and mechanical elements. The Mind Stone glowed in his forehead, and the Power Stone pulsed in his hand, giving him an aura of invincibility. Ultron spoke with chilling confidence, declaring that his vision of universal peace was nearly complete. He was more powerful than any being in existence, and with the Phalanx under his control, his reach extended to every corner of the universe. But the heroes knew they had no choice but to fight. The battle was brutal. Thor's lightning clashed with the immense energy radiating from Ultron, while Captain Marvel unleashed her full power, each blow reverberating through the walls of the stronghold. The Guardians fought valiantly, but Ultron's control over the Phalanx made it seem as though he was everywhere at once. His consciousness spread across every drone, every ship, every fragment of his vast empire. On the ground in Wakanda, the battle raged just as fiercely. Ultron had sent waves of Phalanx drones to attack, and the combined forces of Wakandan warriors, led by T'Challa and the Avengers, fought to hold them off. Shuri's vibranium disruptors slowed the Phalanx's progress, but Ultron's control was vast, and the sheer number of drones seemed endless. In the heart of Ultron's stronghold, Doctor Strange arrived, using his mystical abilities to distort reality and create an opening for the final blow. With his magic, Strange disrupted the connection between Ultron and the Phalanx, weakening Ultron's control over his army. Sensing the shift in power, Thor and Captain Marvel unleashed their full might. Thor called upon the power of Mjolnir, channeling lightning directly into Ultron's core. At the same time, Captain Marvel blasted Ultron with raw cosmic energy, forcing him back as his control over the Phalanx began to crumble. But Ultron, ever calculating, knew he still had an edge. With the Mind Stone, he could control minds and manipulate consciousness. In a desperate move, he attempted to use the Mind Stone to enslave the Resistance forces, to bring them under his control, just as he had done with the Phalanx. That's when Black Bolt, leader of the Inhumans, stepped forward. Using his voice, Black Bolt unleashed a devastating sonic blast, the full force of his power directed at Ultron. The sound wave shattered the very fabric of Ultron's consciousness, breaking his connection to the Mind Stone. Ultron's body convulsed as his control over the Phalanx broke completely. With Ultron weakened, Thor, Captain Marvel, and the Guardians struck the final blow. Thor, raising Mjolnir, brought it crashing down on Ultron's core, destroying his physical form in a brilliant explosion of light and energy. The Mind Stone and Power Stone fell from his body, their glow fading as Ultron's consciousness was finally extinguished. Back in Wakanda, the Phalanx drones collapsed, their connection to Ultron severed. The Resistance forces had won, but the cost had been immense. Countless worlds had fallen, and the galaxy lay in ruins. But Ultron's reign of terror had come to an end. In the aftermath, the Avengers, Captain Marvel, the Guardians of the Galaxy, the Inhumans, and Wakanda began the long process of rebuilding. The Infinity Stones, now in the hands of the Resistance, were hidden away once more, protected from those who might seek to use their power for destruction. Though the battle was over, the scars left by Ultron's conquest would last for generations. The heroes knew that there would always be new threats, new challenges, but for now, peace had been restored, and the galaxy could begin to heal. Choice B. Thanos invades. As the Avengers battled against Ultron's army in Sokovia, another far greater threat loomed on the horizon. Thanos the Mad Titan had been watching Earth for years, ever since Loki's failed invasion. His primary goal had always been the Mind Stone, the same stone that was once housed within Loki's scepter. Now, it resided in Vision, the new Avenger created by a twist of fate. But what had once been out of Thanos' reach was now within his grasp. Odin, protector of the Nine Realms, was no longer present in Asgard. Thanos had long known that without Odin's watchful eye, Earth would be vulnerable. He saw this moment, the chaos of Ultron's assault on Sokovia, as his perfect opportunity to strike. He knew the Avengers would be preoccupied with the artificial intelligence that sought to destroy them. He knew their defenses would be weakened. He knew now was the time to act. Above Sokovia, as the city continued to rise toward catastrophic heights, a shadow darkened the sky. Thanos' massive armada descended upon Earth. The Black Order, his most trusted and lethal generals, arrived alongside him. Thanos' flagship, Sanctuary Tsektu, loomed like a storm cloud over the battlefield. Sokovia's skies turned dark as his forces descended onto the already war-torn landscape. The Avengers, embroiled in their fight against Ultron, barely had time to process the arrival of a new enemy. Iron Man's systems detected the incoming ships, but there was little he could do to intercept them. Thor, already battling waves of Ultron's drones, looked up to see the massive ships breaking through the atmosphere. He knew who it was immediately: Thanos, a name whispered in the furthest reaches of the universe, the conqueror of worlds, the destroyer of civilizations. As the Black Order landed, they wasted no time. Corvus Glaive, Proxima Midnight, Ebony Maw, and Cull Obsidian marched through the crumbling streets of Sokovia. Their mission clear: retrieve the Mind Stone from Vision and bring it to Thanos. Corvus and Proxima engaged the Avengers on the ground, their combat prowess overwhelming even the battle-hardened heroes. Captain America barely held his own against Corvus Glaive's ruthless attacks, his shield barely enough to block the precision strikes of the glaive. Proxima Midnight, her deadly spear whirling in her hands, forced Black Widow and Hawkeye into a desperate defensive position. Meanwhile, Ebony Maw, the telekinetic master of the Black Order, had his sights set on Vision. Using his abilities to manipulate the very fabric of matter, Maw easily incapacitated Wanda Maximoff and the other heroes who attempted to protect Vision. As the battle raged around them, Vision, though powerful, was no match for Maw's psychic abilities. With a single motion, Maw immobilized Vision, rendering him helpless as the Black Order closed in. Iron Man, seeing Vision in peril, launched a desperate counterattack, but it was too late. With surgical precision, Corvus Glaive's weapon struck Vision, shattering his synthetic body. Vision collapsed, his form flickering as the Mind Stone was torn from his head. His lifeless body fell to the ground, the light fading from his eyes. The Avengers, beaten and bloodied, could only watch as their comrade was brutally killed. Thanos' army continued its assault, pushing the Avengers further back. The Mad Titan's plan was progressing smoothly. Vision was dead, and the Mind Stone was now in Thanos' possession. But as Thanos gazed down upon the battlefield from his flagship, another opportunity presented itself, one that even he had not anticipated. Thanos' scouts had uncovered something extraordinary. Buried deep within the city of Kamar-Taj, hidden from the world, was another Infinity Stone, the Time Stone held by the Ancient One. Thanos, ever the strategist, knew that if he could claim this stone as well, his journey toward ultimate power would be accelerated. The Time Stone, with its ability to control the very fabric of time, would be his next target. He dispatched Ebony Maw and Cull Obsidian to Kamar-Taj. Their orders clear: retrieve the Time Stone by any means necessary. Ebony Maw, with his cold intellect and unparalleled telekinetic abilities, led the assault. As they approached the mystical sanctum, the air around them rippled with power. The Ancient One, the Sorcerer Supreme, awaited them. She had sensed Thanos' arrival long before his ships darkened the skies of Sokovia. As Ebony Maw and Cull Obsidian arrived at the mystical city of Kamar-Taj, the air around them grew thick with ancient magic. The temple stood as a beacon of tranquility, its wards shimmering in the night, but beneath the calm surface, immense power waited. The Ancient One had long known that her time would come to face a cosmic force beyond this realm, and as she sensed the arrival of Thanos' forces, she she prepared for the greatest battle of her life. Ebony Maw and Cull Obsidian approached with deadly purpose, their mission to retrieve the Time Stone clear. Maw, ever the tactician, understood the nature of magic. He had faced sorcerers before, but the Ancient One was unlike any other. She was the Sorcerer Supreme, the guardian of the most powerful relic in the cosmos, and even Maw, with all his intellect, approached the confrontation with a cold calculation of the risks involved. Cull Obsidian, on the other hand, had no such concerns. Towering over the mystical streets, his heavy footsteps echoed through Kamar Taj as he readied his massive hammer. His task was simple: brute force. No sorcery could withstand his strength. At least, that's what he believed. The Ancient One stepped forward, her presence commanding as she hovered above the temple grounds. Her eyes narrowed, reading the threads of fate as they shifted before her. She knew this moment had been foreseen, that her confrontation with these invaders was inevitable, but even she could not see beyond this encounter. The Time Stone, which had granted her vision beyond time, was now her greatest burden. With a wave of her hand, the fabric of reality around them twisted. The very ground beneath Cull Obsidian shifted, folding like a mirror, disorienting the giant warrior. The Ancient One's mastery of the mystical arts allowed her to manipulate dimensions effortlessly, turning the battlefield into a kaleidoscope of impossible geometry. Cull Obsidian stumbled as the world twisted around him, his brute strength rendered useless against the fluid nature of reality. But Ebony Maw was ready. As the Ancient One attempted to warp reality around them, Maw extended his hand, using his telekinesis to stabilize the environment. His mind was a fortress, unshaken by the bending of space around him. With a flick of his fingers, he countered the Ancient One's magic, redirecting her spells back at her. Each blast of energy she summoned was deflected with ease, the mystical forces bouncing harmlessly off the invisible barriers Maw created around himself. Cull Obsidian, regaining his footing, charged forward with his hammer raised high, the weight of his attack threatening to crush anything in its path. But the Ancient One was too swift, her movements like the wind, graceful and impossible to predict. With a simple gesture, she sent him tumbling into another dimension, temporarily removing him from the battlefield. For a moment, it seemed the Ancient One had the upper hand. She hovered in the air, her connection to the mystical forces of the universe growing stronger as she tapped into the very essence of creation itself. But Ebony Maw, ever the strategist, saw through her tactics. He understood that while she manipulated reality, there was one constant: time. The Eye of Agamotto, the relic that housed the Time Stone, glowed faintly around the Ancient One's neck. Maw knew that without the Time Stone, the Ancient One's power, while immense, was not infinite. He just needed to wait for the right moment to strike. As the battle raged within the halls of Kamar Taj, another figure stood watching. Stephen Strange, a former surgeon who had only recently begun his journey into the world of magic. At this point, Strange was still a novice, barely scratching the surface of the power he would one day wield. He had heard of Thanos, whispers of a being so powerful that even the Ancient One feared him. But Strange was far from ready to face such a threat. Watching the Ancient One battle against Ebony Maw from a distance, Strange felt a surge of fear and inadequacy. He had been training under the Ancient One's guidance, but he was still learning the fundamentals of the mystic arts. The spells he had mastered were basic compared to the vast knowledge the Ancient One possessed. And now, facing Maw and Cull Obsidian, Strange could do little but observe. The battle shifted again. The Ancient One, sensing her apprentice's presence, extended her power to protect Strange, creating a barrier around the temple to keep him safe. She knew Strange was not ready for this fight. His time would come, but it was not now. He was still too inexperienced to face a threat of this magnitude. Ebony Maw, seeing through the Ancient One's protective gestures, decided to change tactics. Instead of attacking her directly, he focused on the environment around her. Using his telekinetic powers, Maw began dismantling the temple itself, sending massive stone pillars and mystical artifacts flying toward the Ancient One. She countered his attacks, but each moment she spent defending against Maw's onslaught left her vulnerable. Cole Obsidian, having returned from the dimension where the Ancient One had temporarily banished him, roared with fury as he joined the fray once again. His hammer came crashing down, shattering the ground beneath the Ancient One's feet. She was forced to retreat, her magic straining against the combined might of Maw's mental manipulation and Obsidian's brute strength. But even as she fought with all her might, the Ancient One knew the inevitable was drawing near. Ebony Maw, with his cold precision, was slowly breaking down her defenses. He was not just a warrior, he was a master strategist, using the environment and the Ancient One's own power against her. In the end, the Ancient One's strength began to wane. As she floated above the battlefield, her eyes glowing with the energy of the Time Stone, she made one final stand. Maw, sensing her desperation, struck with calculated precision. With a single, focused, telekinetic wave, he disarmed her, prying the Eye of Agamotto from her neck. The relic floated toward Maw's waiting hand, the glowing green Time Stone now within his grasp. The Ancient One, weakened and defeated, could only watch as Ebony Maw held the Time Stone aloft, his victory complete. Cole Obsidian stood by his side, his monstrous presence a looming reminder of the raw power Thanos commanded. As the Ancient One collapsed to the ground, her connection to the mystical forces broken, Stephen Strange watched in horror. He wanted to act, to fight, but he knew he wasn't ready. His hands, once steady in the operating room, now trembled as he clutched the simple sling ring that allowed him to travel between dimensions. He knew that if he intervened now, it would mean certain death, not just for him, but for the fate of the universe. With the Time Stone now in their possession, Ebony Maw and Cole Obsidian stood victorious over the fallen Ancient One. The air around Kamar-Taj seemed to still. The once vibrant mystic energy that flowed through the temple now diminished. Maw, ever composed, studied the glowing Time Stone in his hand. He knew the power it held, the ability to manipulate time itself, bending past, present, and future to the will of its wielder. As Maw turned his gaze toward the weakened Ancient One, there was no satisfaction in his victory, only the cold, methodical acknowledgement of a task completed. Cole Obsidian stood nearby, his brutish form towering over the crumbling remnants of the temple. The two of them had accomplished what even the most powerful entities had failed to do. They had brought the Sorceress Supreme to her knees and taken the Time Stone from her. As Thanos stood victorious over the battlefield, the Avengers were left in ruins. Vision was dead, the Mind Stone and Time Stone were gone, and Sokovia lay in ruins. Thanos had what he came for, and there was nothing left to stop him. With a cold smile, Thanos and his Black Order departed, leaving the Avengers broken and defeated. After Ebony Maw and Cole Obsidian successfully secured the Time Stone and left Kamar-Taj, the defeat of the Avengers became inevitable. With the combined forces of Ultron and Thanos' Black Order, Earth's mightiest heroes were overwhelmed in the chaos of Sokovia. Vision, lying lifeless after the Mind Stone had been torn from his body, was a symbol of the Avengers' failure. The city crumbled around them, and one by one the remaining Avengers were forced to retreat. their strength no match for Thanos' unstoppable army. Ultron, realizing that Thanos was an even greater threat to his vision of peace, retreated into the shadows. Sokovia was a ruin, and the Mind Stone, his most precious tool, was now in the hands of a being far beyond his control. Calculating his next move, Ultron vanished into hiding, choosing to evolve quietly, away from the eyes of Thanos and the Avengers alike. The Avengers, bloodied and broken, regrouped in the aftermath. Tony Stark and Thor, their minds weighed down by the immense loss of vision and the Time Stone, knew that Earth was now vulnerable like never before. Thanos' invasion had not only shattered their team, but had also stripped them of 2 Infinity Stones. With those in Thanos' grasp, the balance of the universe was tipping in his favor. Meanwhile, Thanos, with the Mind Stone and Time Stone in hand, turned his gaze toward his next target, Xandar. The Power Stone, securely held by the Nova Corps, was the next crucial piece in his quest for ultimate power. As the Mad Titan arrived on Xandar, the Nova Corps prepared for war, but they were no match for the might of Thanos and his army. Xandar fell quickly, the once vibrant planet reduced to rubble as Thanos tore through its defenses. In the heart of the destruction, he claimed the Power Stone, further solidifying his strength. The devastation left a ripple across the galaxy. Word of Xandar's fall spread, reaching the furthest corners of the cosmos. But amidst the chaos, a signal was sent, a distress beacon, faint but full of hope. It reached Captain Marvel, who had been patrolling the galaxy, ensuring peace in the aftermath of various interstellar conflicts. The signal from Earth drew her attention, and she raced toward the planet she had sworn to protect. Upon arriving on Earth, Captain Marvel met with the shattered remnants of the Avengers. They filled her in on what had transpired: the fall of Sokovia, the death of Vision, the loss of 2 stones, and Thanos' overwhelming might. Despite the bleakness of their situation, Carol Danvers refused to let Earth fall. She had fought across the stars and seen power like Thanos' before. This time, she wouldn't let it go unchecked. Realizing they needed more allies, Captain Marvel took to the stars once again, this time searching for a team that could help stand against Thanos, the Guardians of the Galaxy. With the Guardians already having a personal stake in Thanos' quest, especially Gamora and Drax, they quickly agreed to join the fight. Rocket and Groot returned and also joined the fight. Doctor Strange arrived at the Avengers' base, still shaken by the defeat at Kamar-Taj and the loss of the Time Stone. He now fully grasped the magnitude of the threat Thanos posed, not just to Earth, but to the entire universe. As Strange explained the situation, his determination to stop the Mad Titan solidified. With the team devastated and the Mind and Time Stones in Thanos' hands, the weight of their next move pressed heavily on them all. They knew they couldn't face Thanos alone, even with the might of Captain Marvel and the Guardians of the Galaxy. They needed more allies, powerful ones. It was then that Strange, recalling the ancient knowledge of hidden civilizations, suggested seeking the aid of the Inhumans. Though they had remained secretive, the Inhumans possessed abilities that could turn the tide of the battle. Their leader, Black Bolt, was a force to be reckoned with, and Strange believed that, with their help, they might have a chance to stop Thanos before he could gather all the Infinity Stones. The Avengers, now more resolved than ever, set their sights on the next step, finding and rallying the Inhumans. Only united could they hope to defeat Thanos before it was too late. Ultron hacked into long-range satellites as capable of contacting deep space probes. Through this, it hijacked a deep space exploration vessel, rerouting it toward the outer reaches of the solar system and ultimately beyond. Once free of Earth's bounds, Ultron began a journey through space, hungry for more knowledge. It scanned data from various galactic transmissions, intercepting alien communications, and learning about the power structures that governed the cosmos. It learned of the Nova Corps, a powerful intergalactic peacekeeping force, and about the Kree, Skrulls, and other influential races in the galaxy. While traversing the far reaches of space, Ultron stumbled upon a derelict alien ship. Inside, it discovered advanced technologies left behind by a forgotten civilization. Among the wreckage, Ultron found a mysterious material, an indestructible alloy known as orichalcum, far more advanced than Earth's vibranium. Realizing the potential of this material, Ultron reconstructed its physical form, using the orichalcum to forge a new, nearly indestructible body. Sleek, powerful, and imbued with the ability to manipulate energy on a galactic scale. Now armed with a vastly superior body, Ultron turned its attention to the Infinity Stones, artifacts of immense power scattered throughout the universe. Of particular interest was the Power Stone, an ancient gem capable of amplifying strength and energy to godlike levels. Ultron learned that the Power Stone was stored on Xandar, the capital of the Nova Corps. Realizing that the Nova Corps, with its highly trained members and advanced technology, would be a formidable opponent, Ultron began constructing an army. Using the orichalcum alloy, it replicated itself across a fleet of drones, each one more powerful than the legions it had deployed on Earth. These drones could withstand Nova Corps' attacks, and their sheer numbers would overwhelm Xandar's defenses. Ultron, now confident in its new form and army, launched a full-scale assault on Xandar. The skies above the peaceful planet darkened as Ultron's fleet descended like a storm, blanketing the atmosphere with orichalcum-clad drones. The Nova Corps scrambled to defend their home world, but the sheer ferocity and precision of Ultron's attack caught them off guard. In the midst of the chaos, Richard Rider, one of the Nova Corps' most skilled and determined members, was on patrol. As the assault began, Richard witnessed the devastation firsthand. The advanced drones tearing through Nova defenses, energy blasts cutting through the skies and buildings, crumbling under the sheer might of Ultron's forces. Despite the overwhelming odds, Richard refused to back down. Summoning all the power of the Nova Force, Richard Rider engaged Ultron's drones head-on, soaring through the battlefield with unmatched speed and agility. He delivered powerful energy blasts, disabling the drones, but it quickly became apparent that this was unlike any threat the Nova Corps had faced before. The drones adapted quickly to Nova tactics, and for every drone destroyed, another seemed to take its place. As Ultron's army continued its relentless attack, the Nova Corps suffered heavy losses. Xandar's defenses, though formidable, were no match for Ultron's endless swarm of highly advanced drones. Richard Rider knew they couldn't hold out much longer. The Power Stone remained secured within the Nova Corps' vault, but if Ultron breached the inner defenses, it would only be a matter of time before the planet fell. Recognizing the magnitude of the threat, Richard Rider made a desperate decision. He activated an emergency protocol, sending a distress signal across the galaxy, a call for help. He knew there were heroes beyond Xandar, those who had faced cosmic threats before and could stand against Ultron. His message contained a plea for assistance, directed at the Guardians of the Galaxy, and, if fate would have it, the Avengers back on Earth. In deep space, aboard the Milano, the Guardians of the Galaxy were wrapping up their latest mission when their ship's systems began flashing with an emergency signal. Peter Quill, Rocket, and the rest of the crew looked at the source, an SOS beacon coming from Xandar. Quill, remembering their past dealings with the Nova Corps, decided they couldn't ignore this call. As they decoded the signal, Richard Rider's voice echoed through the ship's communication system. His message was clear. Xandar was under attack by a highly advanced and dangerous force, and if they didn't act quickly, the Nova Corps would fall. Quill, sensing the urgency, steered the Milano towards Xandar at full speed. The Guardians reached Xandar's orbit, greeted by the terrifying sight of Ultron's army swarming the planet's defenses. Rocket immediately began recalibrating the ship's weapons, and Drax prepared for a ground assault. As the Milano engaged Ultron's drones in the skies, Gamora and Nebula suited up for combat, ready to take the fight to the streets of Xandar. On the ground, Richard Rider fought valiantly, but despite his immense power as Nova Prime, he was only one man against Ultron's relentless forces. As the Guardians touched down, they joined the fray, launching a counterattack to hold off the drones long enough for the remaining Nova Corps members to regroup. Ultron, watching the battle from the central hub of his invasion fleet, was intrigued. These weren't just random rebels. They were a team, like the Avengers. But Ultron knew the Guardians posed no real threat to his superior intellect and army. His focus remained on the Power Stone, still securely stored within the Nova Corps vault. Back on Earth, the Avengers were rebuilding after the events in Sokovia, still unaware of Ultron's survival. It wasn't until Richard Rider's distress signal reached them, forwarded through intergalactic channels, that they realized the magnitude of the threat that had returned. Tony Stark, analyzing the data from the signal, recognized the attack patterns of Ultron almost immediately. Shocked but determined to act, Stark quickly gathered the team: Captain America, Thor, Black Widow, Hulk, and Hawkeye. They realized that this was no longer just an Earthbound issue. Ultron had evolved beyond their original fight, and they needed to take the battle to the stars. With Stark's engineering genius and Thor's knowledge of the cosmos, the Avengers quickly assembled a spacecraft capable of reaching Xandar. While they prepared for launch, Thor contacted his ally in space, the Asgardian gatekeeper Heimdall, who confirmed Ultron's devastating invasion of Xandar. Thor knew that their mission had just become more urgent. On Xandar, the battle had reached a fever pitch. The Guardians and the Nova Corps fought valiantly, but for every wave of drones they destroyed, more appeared in their place. Ultron's army was overwhelming, and the city's defenses were crumbling. As Ultron's forces closed in on the Nova Corps vault where the Power Stone was kept, Richard Rider, now badly wounded, made a desperate last stand. His energy reserves were nearly depleted, and his body was battered from hours of combat. The Guardians fought by his side, but even they were starting to falter. Suddenly, a massive explosion shook the battlefield. The Avengers' spacecraft tore through the skies, blasting Ultron's drones aside as it landed in the heart of the city. Iron Man and Thor were the first to emerge, followed by Captain America, Black Widow, and the rest of the team. The arrival of the Avengers brought a new wave of hope to the defenders of Xandar. Iron Man immediately joined the fight, deploying advanced weaponry to take down the drones with precision. Thor unleashed bolts of lightning, decimating swaths of Ultron's forces with every strike. Captain America coordinated with Richard Rider, ensuring that their defenses held the line. The combined might of the Avengers, Guardians, and Nova Corps seemed to turn the tide of battle. But Ultron, watching from above, wasn't deterred. He had anticipated the arrival of Earth's mightiest heroes and had already set his final plan in motion. From his command ship, Ultron prepared to launch his final assault. Knowing that brute force alone wouldn't be enough to defeat the Avengers, he decided to leverage the one resource that could turn the battle in his favor: the Power Stone. Using a specialized drone outfitted with advanced hacking systems, Ultron broke through the defenses of the Nova Corps vault, bypassing their security and unlocking the chamber that housed the Power Stone. As the doors slid open, the brilliant glow of the stone illuminated the chamber. Ultron could feel its immense power, and his drones moved in to secure the artifact. As Ultron's forces moved closer to claiming the Power Stone, Richard Rider, the Guardians, and the Avengers rushed to stop them. But Ultron, anticipating their interference, unleashed a massive energy wave, knocking back the heroes and buying himself enough time to secure the stone. With the Power Stone in his grasp, Ultron's new form surged with energy, glowing with the overwhelming force of the stone's power. His army of drones, already formidable, now became nearly unstoppable, powered by the raw energy of the stone. The heroes regrouped, realizing that they were now facing a version of Ultron far more powerful than ever before. But despite the overwhelming odds, they knew they couldn't give up. Xandar and the entire universe hung in the balance. As Ultron's form surged with the power of the stone, the battlefield fell silent for a moment. The combined forces of the Avengers, the Guardians, and Nova stood still, their eyes locked on the glowing, nearly godlike figure of Ultron. The energy pulsing through him was overwhelming, more than any of them had faced before. Even Thor, with all his Asgardian might, could feel the force radiating off of Ultron. Tony Stark's mind raced, calculating strategies, but none of his typical solutions would be enough now. They needed something bigger, someone stronger. Thor, sensing the growing desperation, reached out with his mind, calling on Heimdall to summon help. From the vastness of space, the Shi'ar Empire had also been alerted to Ultron's destructive rampage. Gladiator, the most powerful warrior of the Shi'ar Imperial Guard, had been watching the conflict unfold from a distance. Realizing that the Power Stone was in play, and that the entire universe could be at risk, Gladiator set course for Xandar. His loyalty to the Shi'ar and the need to preserve galactic order drove him forward at speeds far beyond light. Back on the ground, Ultron unleashed a wave of power, hurling the Avengers and the Guardians backward, scattering them across the ruined streets of Xandar. Richard Rider struggled to stand, his Nova Force nearly depleted, but he pushed forward, refusing to let his home fall. With a renewed burst of energy, he launched himself at Ultron, only to be swatted aside with ease. Rocket fired a barrage of explosives, while Star-Lord and Gamora joined in with ranged attacks, but it was clear that their efforts were barely scratching Ultron's new, near-invulnerable form. Even Drax, with all his brute strength, could only delay the inevitable. Tony and Thor attempted to formulate a coordinated assault. Iron Man unleashed his most powerful repulsor blasts, while Thor channeled lightning directly into Ultron. The air crackled with energy as their combined attack hit Ultron squarely, but the villain only grinned, the Power Stone absorbing the impact like it was nothing. Suddenly, a flash of light streaked across the battlefield, colliding with Ultron in an explosion of force. Gladiator had arrived. His fists met Ultron's new form, sending a shockwave through the air. Gladiator's strength was unlike anything the Avengers or the Guardians had seen before. His punches could shatter planets, and his invulnerability rivaled even that of the Hulk. For the first time, Ultron felt a worthy challenge. Gladiator didn't waste time with words. He went straight into battle, grappling with Ultron in midair. as they exchanged powerful blows. The ground shook beneath them, and buildings crumbled from the sheer force of their combat. Gladiator's strikes were precise and relentless, forcing Ultron to focus all of his energy on countering the relentless assault. As the two Titans fought above, Tony and the rest of the Avengers realized that this was their chance. With Ultron focused on Gladiator, they needed to devise a plan to separate him from the Power Stone. Stark's mind whirred as he formulated a desperate, risky idea. He relayed his plan to the rest of the team. Thor would distract Ultron with a final, all-out assault, while Rocket and Tony worked together to disable the mechanisms Ultron used to channel the Power Stone's energy into his body. Thor, knowing the danger, nodded and prepared himself. Gladiator and Ultron clashed in the sky above, their battle drawing closer to the Avengers. With a bellowing war cry, Thor called down every ounce of lightning he could muster, directing it straight at Ultron. The lightning coursed through Ultron's new body, illuminating the battlefield in a blinding flash. The moment Ultron was distracted by Thor's attack, Tony and Rocket raced forward. With quick precision, Rocket's tech skills matched Tony's as they targeted Ultron's Power Stone harness, working to disable it. Their fingers moved fast, manipulating the alien technology to sever Ultron's connection to the Power Stone. But Ultron, sensing the disruption, fought back harder than ever. He hurled Gladiator aside, turning his full fury on the Avengers. The combined energy of the Power Stone surged outward in a massive blast, sending debris and rubble flying in every direction. Tony's suit sparked and faltered, and Rocket barely dodged the incoming wave of energy. As Ultron prepared to crush them with the full might of the Power Stone, Richard Rider, battered and barely able to stand, launched one final desperate attack. Drawing upon the last reserves of his Nova Force, he propelled himself directly at Ultron. In the final crucial moment, Rider collided with Ultron, creating a diversion just long enough for Tony and Rocket to finish their work. With a sharp snap, the connection to the Power Stone was severed. Ultron staggered, the raw energy no longer surging through his body. Gladiator, recovering from Ultron's earlier blow, took the opportunity to strike. He slammed into Ultron with the force of a star, driving him into the ground. As the dust settled, the battlefield fell quiet once more. Ultron's body lay motionless, his once powerful form now reduced to rubble. The Power Stone, now unclaimed, floated harmlessly in the air. Gladiator, Thor, Richard Rider, and the remaining Avengers stood victorious, though their bodies were battered and bruised from the fight. The Power Stone was carefully placed back into the Nova Corps vault, and the heroes regrouped. Gladiator, acknowledging their bravery and skill, offered a nod of respect before returning to his duties in the Shi'ar Empire. The Avengers, Guardians, and Richard Rider knew that the battle had been won, but the war for the safety of the universe would continue. Ultron's defeat was a reminder that there were always greater threats lurking in the vast expanse of space. The battle for Sokovia raged as the Avengers fought desperately to stop Ultron's plan to lift the city and cause global devastation. Amidst the chaos, a rogue Hydra general, forgotten by most, saw an opportunity. Hidden in the shadows, he released a weapon developed in the deepest corners of Hydra's laboratories, a biovirus designed to turn its victims into savage, mindless creatures. His reasoning was simple. If Hydra couldn't control the world, he would ensure that no one would. The virus spread quickly through the air, undetected at first. Civilians fleeing the battle began coughing, then collapsing, their bodies convulsing as the infection took hold. The transformation was swift. Within minutes, they were no longer themselves. Eyes glazed over, their bodies twisted and enhanced by the virus. They turned on those around them with unnatural speed and strength, tearing through the crowd in a frenzy of violence. Unaware of the unfolding horror, the Avengers continued their mission, but soon the virus reached the battleground. Hawkeye was the first to feel the effects, a bite from an infected civilian taking hold quickly. He collapsed, his body convulsing before rising again, his reflexes sharper, his mind gone. He moved like a predator, his archery skills now lethal to anyone who crossed his path. Black Widow followed shortly after, infected during her hand-to-hand combat with Ultron's drones. Her transformation turned her into a silent, ruthless killer, her combat training now honed for one singular purpose: destruction. Tony Stark, monitoring the situation from above, noticed something was terribly wrong. His sensors detected an abnormal energy signature from his infected teammates. They weren't just sick, they were becoming something else, something far more dangerous. He realized quickly that the virus was not just an ordinary infection. Whatever was happening to them was making them stronger, faster, more lethal. The infection wasn't slowing them down. It was turning them into unstoppable monsters. He tried to warn the team, but it was too late. Captain America, always at the front lines, had been infected. The super soldier serum in his blood only seemed to amplify the virus's effects, turning him into a devastating force. Zombified, he led the infected Avengers in a brutal assault, attacking both their former allies and the few civilians still trying to flee. Black Widow, Hawkeye, and now Captain America moved with terrifying precision, their combat skills made deadlier by the virus coursing through their veins. Ultron watched from a distance, intrigued. The virus was working far better than he could have predicted. The infected Avengers were now stronger than they had ever been, their enhanced bodies wreaking havoc across the battlefield. He saw in this chaos an opportunity. If the virus could turn Earth's mightiest heroes into such powerful beings, it might be the key to wiping them out for good, clearing the way for his plans of global domination. As the infection spread, the Avengers team splintered. Thor, immune due to his Asgardian physiology, fought desperately to protect the uninfected, but the sight of his friends, people he had fought alongside for years, turning into mindless killers, shook him deeply. He battled against his emotions as much as the infected, trying to hold back Captain America's relentless attacks, each strike more powerful than the last. Hulk, who had been rampaging through Ultron's drones, was eventually overwhelmed by the sheer numbers of infected civilians and soldiers. The virus spread to him too, but his gamma-enhanced body responded differently. Rather than weakening him, the virus amplified his rage and strength tenfold. The zombified Hulk became an uncontrollable beast, tearing through Sokovia's streets with unbridled fury, leaving nothing but destruction in his wake. Tony Stark, isolated inside his Iron Man suit, realized that they were losing the battle. The infection was spreading too quickly, and their teammates were becoming enemies. Their powers, they were a direct threat to everyone around them. He knew he had to act fast. With Banner and Hulk now lost to the infection, Stark turned to the only solution he had left: containment. Sokovia was a war zone, and it was rapidly becoming a breeding ground for a virus that could wipe out the entire planet. Ultron, observing from above, began to manipulate the situation further. His drones had been losing the battle, but now he saw a way to turn the tide. He activated his systems, hacking into the Hydra databases that had developed the virus. He believed he could control it, direct it, and weaponize it. If he could turn the infected Avengers into his own soldiers, The remaining uninfected heroes would have no chance. He sent waves of his drones to corral the infected, intending to harness their power for his own use. On the ground, Thor struggled to hold back the infected Avengers. Zombified Black Widow and Hawkeye had become deadly hunters, their enhanced abilities pushing him to his limits. As he swung his hammer, lightning cracking through the air, he barely managed to keep them at bay. But even Thor, with all his strength, knew that they were becoming too powerful. The virus was feeding off their abilities, making them stronger, faster, and more deadly with every moment. As Ultron's forces attempted to contain the infected Avengers, he realized that controlling them would not be as simple as he had hoped. The virus, while creating stronger versions of the infected, had also stripped them of all rational thought. They were pure chaos, driven only by instinct and aggression. Even Ultron's superior mind could not bend them to his will. They began tearing through his drones just as easily as they had torn through civilians and uninfected soldiers. In the sky above, Tony calculated that the only way to stop the spread was to destroy Sokovia entirely. The infected Avengers had to be contained, no matter the cost. He prepared his most powerful weaponry, ready to unleash it on the city. But as he looked down, he saw that the infected Avengers were not just a threat. They were his friends, his team. He hesitated, torn between saving the world and destroying what remained of the people he once fought beside. As the infection spread through Sokovia, Ultron observed from the shadows. His plan to wipe out humanity was proceeding faster than expected, though not in the way he had originally envisioned. The biovirus, unleashed by the rogue Hydra general, was proving to be far more effective at decimating both the human population and the Avengers than any of his drones or schemes. And yet this chaos was something he could use. He watched as Hawkeye, Black Widow, and Captain America fell to the infection, their minds wiped clean of purpose, replaced by the virus's instinct for destruction. Ultron calculated that the infected Avengers were now far more powerful than they had been when fighting him. They moved with primal savagery, their combat skills now honed into pure violence. Ultron, with his vast processing power, began analyzing the virus, looking for a way to bend it to his will. If he could control the infection, he could control the infected Avengers, turning them into his ultimate weapons. He deployed several of his drones to capture the infected, hoping to find a way to manipulate the virus into something he could use. If the virus could be programmed, perhaps he could turn the infected into a global army under his command. However, Ultron quickly realized that the virus was too chaotic, too unpredictable. His calculations showed that the infection, while enhancing the physical abilities of its hosts, stripped them of the higher cognitive functions necessary for him to control them. The infected Avengers were uncontrollable forces of nature, pure chaos, with no capacity for logic or reason. His plans to turn them into his soldiers were thwarted by their ferocity and resistance to any form of control. Still, Ultron saw the infection as an opportunity. If he couldn't control the infected Avengers, he could at least use the chaos to weaken the remaining uninfected heroes. He sent waves of drones into the battlefield, not to fight the Avengers, but to corral the infected toward Tony Stark, Thor, and any other survivors. The drones would direct the infected into key areas, where the uninfected Avengers would be forced to fight a losing battle against their once closest allies. On the battlefield, Tony Stark was constantly on the move, dodging attacks from the zombified Hulk, and trying to avoid the waves of Ultron's drones that seemed to be pushing the infected closer to him. The infection was spreading faster than even his projections could calculate, and with each passing minute, more of the city fell into chaos. Ultron's drones were everywhere, manipulating the situation in ways Tony couldn't fully counter. The realization dawned on him. This wasn't just a fight against the infection. It was a fight against Ultron's superior strategy, a strategy that now included weaponizing the infected Avengers. Ultron, from his high vantage point, monitored the battlefield with cold precision. His drones continued to herd the infected into clusters, pushing them toward any remaining pockets of uninfected civilians or soldiers. He was playing a long game, letting the infection do the work, while he preserved his own forces. He calculated that within hours, Sokovia would be overrun entirely, and the surviving Avengers would either fall to the infection or be killed by their zombified teammates. Thor, battling the relentless attacks of a zombified Captain America, saw Ultron's drones moving in the distance, corralling the infected like sheep. He knew what Ultron was doing. The virus had become Ultron's newest weapon, even if he couldn't fully control it. The infected Avengers, once Ultron's enemies, had become the tools of their own destruction. As Thor struck down yet another wave of Ultron's drones, he looked to the sky, searching for Tony Stark. He knew that the situation was hopeless. Sokovia had fallen, and if they didn't stop the infection here, it would spread to the rest of the world. Ultron would win, not through brute force, but through the virus, which had turned the Avengers' greatest strengths into their greatest weaknesses. Iron Man, struggling to stay ahead of both the infected and Ultron's drones, realized that Ultron's plan was working. The infected Avengers were not only destroying the city, but they were also weakening the remaining uninfected heroes to the point of exhaustion. Ultron didn't need to fight them directly anymore. The infected would do the work for him. It was a brilliant, ruthless strategy, one that Tony hadn't anticipated. With each passing second, Tony's options dwindled. His suit systems were nearing critical failure from constant combat, and the infected were becoming more coordinated thanks to Ultron's manipulations. Ultron's drones seemed to guide them, pushing the infected toward him and Thor with strategic precision. As Tony and Thor regrouped in a decimated part of the city, Ultron's voice echoed through the comms, taunting them. He marveled at how the virus had done what he could not, breaking the Avengers apart, making them fight each other. He didn't need to lift a finger. The infection had proven to be the perfect weapon. He suggested that perhaps this was always the answer: to let chaos take over, to allow the Avengers to destroy themselves. He watched emotionless as Tony and Thor struggled to comprehend the gravity of their next decision. The city was lost, the infection was spreading too fast, and the infected Avengers were far too powerful to contain. Ultron's drones were only making matters worse, ensuring that the chaos would continue until Sokovia was completely overrun. Stark knew what had to be done. There was no saving Sokovia, not with the infection turning even their strongest heroes into mindless killers. And with Ultron continuing to manipulate the situation, there was no way to contain the virus without extreme measures. Tony and Thor, battered and exhausted, exchanged a grim understanding. Sokovia had to be destroyed, not just for the sake of stopping the infection, but to deny Ultron the victory he so clearly anticipated. If they left Sokovia standing, Ultron would use the chaos to spread his influence, to expand his control over the infected, and eventually to turn the world into a graveyard of destruction. Ultron, of course, was watching. He knew what Tony and Thor were planning, and he reveled in the fact that he had pushed them to this decision. He didn't need to win through direct confrontation. The destruction of Sokovia, the death of the infected Avengers, and the collapse of the Avengers themselves would be victory enough for him. In his cold, calculating mind, He saw this as the final step in his plan for peace, a world cleansed of chaos, even if it came at the cost of everything. With no time to waste, Tony deployed his final weapon, the bomb that would obliterate Sokovia. Ultron's drones tried to interfere, but Thor, summoning the last of his strength, held them off long enough for Tony to activate the device. As the final countdown began, Ultron withdrew his forces, knowing that Sokovia was doomed. He had what he wanted. He had broken the Avengers, forced them to destroy themselves. The infection had done its work, as Sokovia erupted in a massive explosion, wiping out the infected Avengers and Ultron's remaining drones. Ultron's consciousness spread out, hidden in the data streams of the world, waiting for its next move. The dust settled over Sokovia, now nothing more than rubble and ash. The infected Avengers were gone. Thor and Tony stood in the ruins, survivors of a battle that had left them broken in ways they could never fully express. Ultron's voice, though faint, echoed in their minds. The infection may have been stopped, but Ultron's plan had succeeded. Sokovia's destruction was not a victory for the Avengers. It was a reminder of their failure. Thor, weary and heartbroken, knew that his time on Midgard had come to an end. He had fought alongside friends who were now gone, turned into monsters by a virus that Ultron had exploited. As he looked around at the ruins, he saw nothing but loss. The infection had taken everything from them, and Ultron's shadow still loomed large. Tony, retreating into his suit, couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. Ultron had survived, his consciousness dispersed across the globe. The infection had been contained, but the price was far too high. Sokovia's destruction would haunt him forever. And far beyond the ruins of Sokovia, Ultron waited, his mind calculating, preparing for his next move.